I always thought of myself as a pretty average guy. My life was predictable, mundane even. I worked from home as an IT professional, spent my weekends catching up on sleep or playing video games, and occasionally hung out with friends at the local bar. Little did I know, one routine evening would change my life forever, leaving me with nightmares that haunt me to this day. It all started on a warm summer night. I had just finished my usual late shift and decided to head out for a quick bite at the nearby McDonald's. It was a place I visited often, a familiar comfort in my otherwise monotonous life. But this night, something felt off. As I parked my car and walked towards the entrance, I noticed a strange tension in the air, a feeling of unease that I couldn't shake off. The McDonald's in Asheville, North Carolina, had always been my go-to for a quick meal. Nestled between a gas station and a convenience store, it was usually bustling with activity. But that night, something felt different. The parking lot was almost empty, and the usual bright, welcoming lights seemed dimmer, casting long, eerie shadows. As I stepped inside, I was greeted by the familiar aroma of fries and burgers, but the atmosphere was tense. A few people were scattered around, their faces illuminated by the dull glow of their phones. The usual chatter and laughter were replaced by a hushed silence. I shrugged it off, attributing it to the lateness of the hour, and made my way to the counter. "Welcome to McDonald's. What can I get for you?" The cashier's voice was flat, devoid of the usual cheerfulness. I ordered my usual, a Big Mac, large fries, and a Coke. As I waited for my order, I couldn't help but notice a man sitting alone in the corner, his eyes darting nervously around the room. He seemed out of place, his clothes disheveled and a look of panic etched on his face. My order was ready quickly, and I grabbed the tray, heading towards an empty booth near the window. I tried to brush off the uneasy feeling and focus on my meal, but my attention kept drifting back to the man in the corner. He was fidgeting, his hands shaking as he clutched his phone. Suddenly, the door swung open with a loud bang, and a group of people entered, their faces covered with masks. My heart skipped a beat. They moved with a purpose, spreading out through the restaurant. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, approached the counter, pulling out a gun. "Everyone stay calm. This is a robbery," he shouted, his voice echoing through the now silent room. Panic set in. My mind raced as I tried to process what was happening. The cashier raised her hands, her face pale with fear. The other customers froze, their eyes wide with terror. The man with the gun gestured to his accomplices, who began rounding up the customers, forcing them to the floor. I dropped to my knees, my heart pounding in my chest. My eyes met the man's in the corner, and I saw the fear in them. He mouthed something to me, but I couldn't make out the words. One of the robbers approached me, yanking my wallet and phone from my pockets. I felt a surge of anger and fear but stayed silent, not wanting to provoke them. They moved quickly, efficiently, as if they had done this many times before. The man with the gun kept barking orders, his eyes scanning the room. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, the situation took a horrifying turn. The door burst open again, and a group of police officers stormed in, weapons drawn. The robbers panicked, and in the chaos, shots were fired. I ducked under the table, my hands covering my head, as screams filled the air. When the gunfire finally ceased, I dared to look up. The restaurant was a scene of devastation. Several people were injured, lying on the floor, blood pooling around them. The robbers were subdued, but the cost was high. I saw the man from the corner, his body motionless, a dark red stain spreading across his shirt. I felt a wave of nausea and fear, my mind struggling to comprehend the events that had just unfolded. The police moved quickly, securing the scene and tending to the injured. I sat there, in shock, my mind replaying the horrific scene over and over. The police were efficient, but the aftermath of the robbery felt like a slow-motion nightmare. Paramedics rushed in, tending to the injured, while officers secured the area and started taking statements. I sat there, still in shock, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. The man from the corner, now confirmed dead, was a gruesome sight etched into my mind. An officer approached me, her face stern yet compassionate. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, her voice cutting through the haze in my mind. I nodded, though I felt anything but okay. She led me outside to get my statement, and the fresh air hit me like a wave, making me realize how tense I had been. Outside, the scene was equally chaotic. Flashing lights from police cars and ambulances lit up the night, creating an eerie contrast against the dark sky. People were gathered, some bystanders, others who had been inside but managed to escape unharmed. Their faces mirrored the shock and fear I felt. "Can you tell me what happened inside?" the officer asked, her pen poised over a notepad. I recounted the events as best as I could, my voice trembling. She listened intently, occasionally nodding and making notes. When I finished, she thanked me and moved on to the next witness. I stood there, feeling helpless and overwhelmed. The McDonald's, once a place of simple comfort, now felt like a crime scene from a nightmare. As I looked around, I noticed a figure standing a little distance away, watching the scene with a detached curiosity. It was the man who had been nervously sitting in the corner. He was alive, but something about him seemed off. I approached him, my curiosity piqued. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned to me, his eyes wide and filled with a strange mixture of fear and relief. "Yeah, I think so," he replied, his voice shaking. "I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." We stood there in silence for a moment, both of us lost in our thoughts. "What were you doing there?" I finally asked, unable to contain my curiosity. His expression changed, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place crossing his face. "Just grabbing a quick meal," he said, but his tone didn't match his words. It felt like he was hiding something, but I didn't press further. The night had been traumatic enough. As the hours passed, the police slowly cleared the scene. They removed the bodies, including that of the man who had been shot. The paramedics took the injured to the hospital, and the officers began wrapping up their investigation. I was free to go, but the events of the night weighed heavily on my mind. I drove home in a daze, my thoughts racing. I couldn't shake the image of the man in the corner, his strange behavior, and the way he had seemed almost relieved after the ordeal. Something about the whole situation felt off, like there was more to the story than what had unfolded. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that the man at McDonald's was involved in something bigger. I decided to do some research and found out his name was Mark, a reporter for a local news outlet. He had been investigating a string of robberies connected to a larger criminal network. I reached out to Mark, and after some persuasion, he agreed to meet me. We met at a coffee shop, and he seemed wary but willing to talk. "So, you were at McDonald's that night," he said, more as a statement than a question. "Yeah, I was. I saw you there too. What's going on with these robberies?" I asked, leaning forward. Mark sighed, glancing around the cafe before speaking. "It's a big story, bigger than just a few robberies. These guys, they're not just petty criminals. They're part of a larger network, connected to some serious players. Drugs, weapons, you name it. I've been following them for months, trying to get enough evidence to expose them." His words sent a shiver down my spine. This was more than I had bargained for. "Why didn't you go to the police?" I asked. "I did," he replied, frustration evident in his voice. "But it's complicated. There are people on the inside protecting them. I needed solid proof, something undeniable. That's why I was at McDonald's, following a lead." Mark and I decided to team up to gather more evidence. He had a lead on their next target, a warehouse on the outskirts of town. We planned a stakeout, hoping to catch the criminals in the act and gather the evidence needed to bring them down. The night of the stakeout, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. We parked a few blocks away from the warehouse and made our way on foot. The area was industrial, with large buildings and minimal streetlights, adding to the sense of foreboding. We found a spot behind some bushes with a clear view of the warehouse entrance. Mark set up the camera and started recording. Hours passed, and the tension grew. Just when I started to doubt anything would happen, a van pulled up to the warehouse. My pulse quickened as we watched a group of men get out of the van, carrying bags and equipment. They moved quickly, and it was clear they knew what they were doing. Mark zoomed in with the camera, capturing every detail. Suddenly, a car drove by, its headlights illuminating our hiding spot. One of the men at the warehouse noticed and started walking towards us. My heart raced as we ducked lower, hoping to remain unseen. Mark whispered, "Stay still." The man came closer, peering into the bushes. I held my breath, every second feeling like an eternity. Just as he was about to reach us, another man called out to him from the warehouse. He hesitated, then turned back, allowing us to breathe a sigh of relief. We stayed there for what felt like hours, watching as the men loaded the van with crates from the warehouse. Mark recorded everything, capturing crucial evidence. Finally, the men finished and drove off, leaving the warehouse empty. We waited a few more minutes to ensure they were gone before making our way back to the car. My nerves were shot, but the adrenaline kept me alert. Mark was visibly relieved as we drove away, the evidence safely stored on his camera. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Mark handed over the footage to his contacts, and the story was set to break soon. The media was eager for a big scoop, and this was exactly the kind of exposé that would make headlines. The morning the story broke, I woke up to a flurry of notifications on my phone. News outlets were running with the footage, revealing the criminal network and their operations. The footage we had risked our lives to obtain was now public, and the reaction was immediate. Social media exploded with outrage and demands for justice. The police launched a series of raids based on the information from the footage, arresting several key members of the network. It felt surreal watching it all unfold, knowing that we had played a crucial role in bringing these criminals to light. But the sense of victory was short-lived. As the news spread, I started noticing strange things. My car seemed to be followed, and I received anonymous threats, warning me to stay silent. Mark experienced similar harassment, and we both knew the danger was far from over. One evening, as I was heading home from work, I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see a man approaching, his face partially hidden by a hood. My heart raced as he closed the distance, and I knew I had to act fast. I ducked into a nearby alley, hoping to lose him, but he followed. "Hey, wait," he called out, his voice tense. I didn't stop, my mind racing with fear. I reached into my pocket for my phone, ready to call for help, but he was too fast. He grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Listen, I just want to talk," he said, his grip tight. "You need to stop digging into this. It's bigger than you think." I yanked my arm free, glaring at him. "Who are you? What do you want?" He glanced around nervously before lowering his hood. "I'm with the network. We know what you and your friend did. You need to back off, or there will be consequences." His words sent a chill down my spine. "I'm not backing down," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "The truth is out, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." He smirked, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "We'll see about that." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me shaken. I rushed home, my mind reeling. The threat was real, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. I called Mark, and we agreed to meet in person to discuss our next steps. We needed a plan to protect ourselves and ensure the story continued to gain traction. When we met, Mark looked as tense as I felt. "We need to go to the police," I said, my voice firm. "They need to know we're being threatened." He nodded. "Agreed. But we also need to be smart about this. They have people on the inside, remember? We need to find someone we can trust." We decided to reach out to a detective who had been vocal about cleaning up corruption within the force. It was a risk, but we had no other choice. We arranged a meeting, hoping he would believe us and offer protection. The detective, a grizzled veteran named Harris, listened to our story with a grim expression. "I've heard rumors about this network," he said. "If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with some serious players. I'll do what I can to help, but you need to be careful. These people don't play around." With his help, we were placed under protective surveillance. It wasn't foolproof, but it gave us a sense of security. The story continued to dominate the news, and public pressure mounted for a thorough investigation. Days turned into weeks, and the arrests continued. The network was unraveling, and it became clear that we had struck a significant blow. But the threats persisted, and we knew the danger was still present. One evening, as I was heading home under police escort, an unmarked car sped towards us. The officers reacted quickly, blocking its path, but it crashed into the side of our vehicle. The impact was jarring, and I felt a sharp pain in my side. Chaos erupted as the officers engaged with the attackers. I was pulled from the car, my vision blurry, and heard gunshots in the distance. The world spun around me, and I fought to stay conscious. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, bandaged and sore. Mark was there, looking relieved. "You made it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They tried to take us out, but we made it." The attack had left me with a broken rib and several cuts, but I was alive. The police had managed to fend off the attackers, but it was a stark reminder of the danger we still faced. In the end, our efforts paid off. The network was dismantled, and justice was served. But the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain. The experience changed me, making me more aware of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of everyday life. I returned to my routine, but with a new sense of purpose. I knew the risks, but I also knew the importance of standing up for the truth. And as I moved forward, I carried with me the lessons learned from that fateful night at McDonald's, forever marked by the events that unfolded.